Let the record reflect, we have reconvened with all members present. As we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, I will ask that you remain standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And as we remain standing, we have a resolution shortly on National Police Week, but also tonight is a candlelight vigil in honor of those officers who have given up their lives protecting our lives. As we look at the action in Trenton over the weekend where an officer went in to save a family, risking his own life, and thankfully came out. As we look at MIT where a college officer happened to run into a bomber and lost his life, let's remember all those who have given their lives for us. Thank you. There are no minutes for approval. The executive minutes of April 8th, that should be on there, will be approved at the next meeting. And welcome everyone on this beautiful fall evening. It was a heck of a spring and summer. Just a few comments before I come down below for a few resolutions. This past Saturday, we had a visit from the Morris Historic Trust, and I want to thank Chief Lou DeRosa for doing an excellent job of presenting the case for keeping Geraldine in Madison. I really think they listened carefully and understand the value of Geraldine, her historic significance. And one of the extra things that was brought up in the conversations is the fact that Geraldine can be a tool for future recruitment as we go to schools and all that, and you see young children just get enamored by an antique fire truck and then think about the possibilities of serving as a volunteer or paid fireman in the future. So thank you again for your work on that. We have great news from the state. I received a phone call from the governor's office between the last meeting and now that we were granted $230,000 for the Green Avenue reconstruction, and you'll see an ordinance on that and a little discussion coming up shortly on Green Avenue. And speaking of green, the Green Fair got a little bit too green last Thursday as the rains finally came that missed April, so it has been postponed and will be this Thursday, same time, starting at 3:30. And I want to announce the Employee of the Month, Police Officer Chris Keller of the Madison Police Department, for his dedication to the seniors of Madison as demonstrated by his frequent visits to the senior housing complexes, on his routine patrols, and by playing the bagpipes for the seniors on St. Patrick's Day every year. And also, 30th anniversary for Chief Lou DeRosa. Congratulations, Chief. Proclamations. I have the liaison for the Health Department come forward. I want to have Marlene Dolan and Flo Rice and also everyone else from our Health Department staff. Come on up. Lisa, come up and, come up and, yes. This is all a team effort. We're recognizing two major members of the team. This is a proclamation for National Nurses Week. Whereas the health and well-being of people are the biggest priorities for our community, and whereas in the Borough of Madison, nurses are an integral part of our healthcare system, serving residents of all ages with skill, knowledge, caring, and commitment. And whereas nurses have a unique perspective and broad understanding of the concept of good health, and whereas May 6th through the 12th, 2013 has been designated National Nurses Week to acknowledge and promote the contribution of nurses in our community. And whereas the Borough of Madison public health nurses, Dr. Flo Rice and Marlene Dolan, have been dedicated to the well-being of Madison residents since 1995 and 1994, respectively. Now, therefore, I, Robert H. Conley, the Mayor of the Borough of Madison, on behalf of the governing body, do hereby recognize the week of May 6th through 12th, 2013 as National Nurses Week and encourage the residents of Madison to acknowledge the many services provided by our dedicated nurses and the tremendous contribution they make for the health of our residents and the well-being of our community every day. Thank you for everything you do.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for this very nice recognition. And oh, this is our junior nurse right here. She attends all our big functions. But yes, thank you, and we have a great staff, and thank you for coming back out tonight. And we're just so thrilled to death to have Lisa supporting us in so many ways and bringing new ideas and vibrant energy, and it's a great time for us at the health department. Thank you.
Take that back.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. You get one.
Oh, I can go?
Yes. Chief Datchison and representatives of the police, and can I have our Public Safety Liaison, Austri Bailey, come up and join me. National Police Week, May 12th through May 18th. Whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Madison Police Department, and whereas nearly 60,000 assaults against law officers are reported each year, resulting in approximately 16,000 injuries, and whereas since the first recorded death in 1791, almost 20,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and have been killed in the line of duty. And whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., and whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 25th Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13th, 2013, which is part of the National Police Week. And whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families in the United States, and flags shall be flown at half-staff. Now, therefore, I, Robert H. Conley, the Mayor of the Borough of Madison, on behalf of the governing body, proclaim May 12th through 18th, 2013 as Police Week in the Borough of Madison, and publicly congratulate the service of law enforcement officers in our community and communities across the nation.
Mayor, members of the council, I want to thank you for this proclamation. I also want to thank you for recognizing the sacrifices that police officers perform on a daily basis. As you know, Police Week is a very special time for us. It's when thousands of officers from around the country, around the world, congregate in Washington, D.C., pay homage to those that have given so much to make our community and our nation safer. On behalf of the men and women of the Madison Police Department, as well as the 900,000 officers across this country, I again thank you for your recognition and your support.
Just one other recognition. I want to congratulate Myra Green, a retired bank executive who recently received Women as Agents of Change Award from the American Association of University Women of New Jersey. So if you see Myra in the streets, please congratulate her. And now to reports from committees. Health, Ms. Vitale.
Thank you, Mayor. Report from Lisa Gola, our health officer. Vaccine for adults that I've talked about it for a couple of weeks now. The Madison Health Department now has the vaccine through the New Jersey Vaccine for Adults program. This program allows for those who are uninsured or underinsured to receive the vaccines such as meningitis, hepatitis A and B. Anyone interested in those vaccines should contact the public health nurses for details and appointment, and you've met them tonight, and they're right here and willing to help you. We have 2 new employee wellness initiatives being provided by the Madison Health Department. One of the things that Lisa has instituted in the Board of Health is wellness initiatives for the DPW guys and the emergency services personnel. So we are going to be doing a Hep A, B, and DTaP vaccination program for all of DPW and the emergency services personnel. The other is the second of the 2013 educational series, which will address skin cancer and prevention with a dermascan on site. Dermascan machine assists in people seeing where there is damage that may need to be addressed by a physician. This is a great opportunity for the guys at DPW, the police officers and whatever who are out in that sun all the time. Madison High School Day of Service, they are going to be participating with the Board of Health and the Health Department. They have 2 initiatives for their Day of Service, which is May 31st. One is to continue the beautification initiative at the Civic Center, which will include students painting murals at the office, and the other is a hand washing program for elementary school students, delivered by the high school students after they have been trained by the Madison Health Department. So they'll be going into the schools and showing the younger kids how to wash their hands and how to be safer. The Health Department has begun its biannual census of unlicensed animals in the community. If you have not renewed your license to date, please come in as soon as possible. All rabies vaccines must be good through October 31st, 2013. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Utilities, Ms. Tsukamoto.
Yes, thank you. The electric department is pumping out water and doing its annual inspections of all the underground manholes and vaults. They are also continuing their monitoring of the control issues at the James Park substation. Also, 2 new lampposts are being installed at the west side of the train station to improve lighting and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Works and Engineering, Mr. Catanello.
Thank you, Mayor. Twice a week garbage pickup is going to recommence on May 20th and is scheduled to continue until September 14th, which is the week after Labor Day. A street-by-street pickup is included in Madison's annual recycling newsletter, and these newsletters are available in the council chamber, online, and in the clerk's office. We are scheduled to commence milling this Thursday, May 16th on Rosedale Avenue. We hope to start paving on Tuesday, May 21st, and that will be completed on Thursday, May 23rd. Residents will be noticed before the milling work begins. Please contact the borough engineer with any further questions. I have been approached by the rank and file members of the DPW to request time at the next council meeting for them to present to the Borough Council and the public a description of what they do in terms of their responsibilities and how they, have been able to do more with less. They feel that it is important for the council members who may never have acted as liaison or towards some of the facilities that they maintain to understand exactly what it is that they do. They'd also like to potentially educate the public. As the request came in late, I did not have time to do an agenda rec for it, but I did promise that I would inform the council. I'll be submitting an agenda rec hopefully in time for the next meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And we have done periodic department reports, so that'll be helpful, so we're looking forward to that agenda rec.
Thank you.
Community Affairs, Mr. Landrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, May Day was a great success. About 1,000 people helped out, and about 40 truckloads of mulch was spread out around town, so thank you to everybody that helped. Part of May Day was funded by a Clean Community Grant, and this year the borough will be receiving from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection a grant for approximately $26,000. And I'll be working with David Bates to get the paperwork on that filled out, so that's good news. The farmers market is scheduled to begin on June 6th. And finally, the Rotary will be holding a Rotary Family Festival. That'll be June 15th and 16th. It's in the Realty parking lot. The proceeds of that will go to support the families of Union Beach. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Public Safety, Ms. Bailey.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'll first start with the Complete Streets Committee. That committee met May 1st, and our first order of business was a discussion of the Sampson Avenue, of the reconstruction, and the commercial property with the vehicles entering and exiting onto Sampson Avenue. Several suggestions were made regarding that particular area for street and sidewalk safety, and our police will be looking into that. And then at the meeting, other issues regarding that commercial property was discussed, which was we need to have a separate meeting on that with the residents, and we will be setting that up. The borough has been exploring all issues with the help of the zoning officer, the health officer, and New Jersey Transit. So we will be announcing a meeting on that particular subject later on. Then Open Space, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Advisory Committee met last week, and the council will be formally final adoption of an ordinance requiring the Open Space Committee to do quarterly reporting to the council. And this will begin in July. And so the committee has been working on an Open Space Fund request form. We'll be using these forms to handle grant requests, and the committee is trying to set up a procedure to ensure the committee has complete information for funding requests in order to advise the council. So that is now in place. And then the fire department, during the month of April, responded to 95 calls, 42 medical calls, 20 general alarms, 14 still alarms, and 19 investigations. The department also inspected 30 single-family and two-family homes for resale to ensure smoke detector and CO compliance. There were 77 fire prevention inspections were completed. And as the mayor said, we had the Morris County Historic Preservation Committee come on Saturday to inspect Geraldine, which was very exciting. We're looking for a grant so that she can be brought home to Madison. And lastly, Project Community Pride Breakfast is this Friday, May 17th. And it's the 30th annual Project Community Pride Recreation Breakfast. It starts at 8 a.m. with arrival and coffee, 8:30, breakfast and awards. It's going to be held at the Madison Hotel. Checks should be made $50 per person to Project Community Pride, 28 Walnut Street, Madison. So if you haven't sent your money in, please do. It's for a very worthy cause. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And Finance and Borough Clerk, Mr.
Thank you.
Wolkowitz.
Thank you. We were contacted by Standard & Poor's recently. Nothing should be read into that fact. They do this on occasion, and it's just a matter of touching base. However, in the process, they did give us their current report, which is not very different from their previous report, and that isn't surprising since they don't have a lot more information than they did when they prepared the prior report. However, they did affirm our AAA rating, but they did continue with a negative outlook. Their comment on the outlook is actually worth reading. I normally shy away from doing that, but in this particular case, please bear with me. I'd like to share with you what they said. They indicated that the negative outlook reflects Standard & Poor's opinion of the borough's weakened finances and recent history of operating deficits through fiscal 2010. However, in fiscal years 2011 and 2012, the borough took significant steps toward restoring structural balance in the current fund. If the borough should maintain balanced current fund operations and very strong reserves, we could revise the outlook back to stable within the 2-year outlook horizon. And the text of the memorandum is much the same, i.e. it states where we are, but it puts a positive spin on where we could be. So let's all hope that they like our 2013 budget and the results from it as much as 2012. Also, we will soon be getting them our audited financials for 2012, and in August of this year, as you've heard us say before, we will be issuing bonds to pay for the 49 acres and a portion of the fields, and at that point, we will also have a revaluation from Standard & Poor's. So we'll see if lucky, maybe at that time they'll end the negative outlook. As well, the period for property tax assessment challenges has ended, and so I can tell you that 2.5% of the assessments have been challenged, which is an unusually low number. On average, we're told 10% of assessments, once a town goes through a revaluation the way we have, is more the norm. What I can tell you is how much money is at stake. And that, hopefully that's below the norm as well. We'll know that shortly. In a week, we'll be meeting to discuss that. We'll be meeting with the people who are responsible for the assessment, and we'll get an update on it, and I hope I'll have some information to share with you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. And just 2 quick follow-ups. I also want to thank the hundreds of volunteers that worked so hard on May Day, and thank the existence of Advil for myself after doing a mountain goat imitation of a mountain goat on the side of the railroad station. It is so great when we see the finished product in the afternoon on a Saturday after just a few hours of hundreds of people working so hard. Also want to recognize or remind the council and also the public that the annual event of the Madison High School varsity baseball team recognizing their seniors in a game under the lights at Dodge Field was rained out this past weekend. It's rescheduled for this Friday, so mayor and council have been invited. It's worth attending just because they invited me to throw out the first pitch, and I couldn't reach home plate when I played softball 15 years ago, so I'm sure it's not going to happen this Friday. So please come and join us and recognize the seniors for their years of playing for Madison. Communication and petitions.
There are none.
And Liz Osborne is under the weather, so Patty is doing a fine job pinch hitting for us. So thank you, Patty, for joining us today. Invitation for discussion. This is the first of 2. This is the opportunity to make comments on discussion items and agenda resolutions. There will be another one shortly where you can make comments on things that are not on the agenda. The rules, again, are limited to the agenda discussions. We are removing number 1, which will be pushed to May 29th. That is the Athletic Foundation fundraising resolution. So that is not on tonight. The others, the amending ordinance 8/2013, which is the alcoholic beverages by underage persons on private property. We'll have Green Avenue reconstruction update. We'll have the $42,000 appropriated for reconstruction Civic Center parking lot. $40,000 for capital improvements for breathing air compressor and cascade cylinders. $11,000 appropriation for firefighter turnout gear, and appropriation of $8,000 from the Fire Fund Trust Fund for radio consultant. Those are, you can comment on those or any of the resolutions that are listed. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less and step up to the microphone, state your name, your address, and the agenda item you are commenting or the resolution you are commenting on. With those rules, anyone wishing to speak? Sam?
Sam Cerciolo, Park Avenue, Madison. I'd just like to touch on that, the ordinance 16 about the alcohol. I just want to explain or tell you about an experience from owning a bar for 19 years. The problem that I used to have is that restaurants in town, and we have quite a few of them, well, what I mean was, as a tavern owner, I had to account for all my customers. I had to make sure they were of age to drink, or else I would be in trouble. I have a liquor license I could lose. But a lot of restaurants, they don't get no liquor license, but I've known many situations where a 21-year-old kid would take a 16-year-old girl to one of the restaurants, open up a bottle of wine, and I mean, I know this happens. So what I'm trying to say is maybe you can plug in this where private property, send letters to all the restaurants and somehow say they got to be accountable and they can be in trouble also. That's just my suggestion.
Yep,
From my experience.
very good.
The other thing is resolution 174. What is that all about? How much did that cost us? The settlement or something on 42 Main Street or something?
That is money coming in to the borough.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
We sue them?
They had some fines related to violations, and they are paying up on those fines.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to bring that up. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I close this part of the agenda, and we move on to agenda discussions. And first one is the amendment to the alcoholic beverages by underage persons on private property. Carmella?
Thank you, Mayor. As you might remember, we passed an ordinance the end of April regarding the underage drinking on private property. In listening to lots of people speaking to us, there were a lot of concerns, and one of them was that we should institute a Good Samaritan clause in this. So there's two new sections of the amended ordinance that's presented tonight. And the one new section is that the municipal judge should have the discretion to waive the penalty provisions of sections A, B, and C above if the defendant is enrolled in an educational institution that has imposed administrative sanctions and penalties against the defendant for the offense. The new section is if someone calls 911 and they're involved and they're reporting an underage person who is in need of medical assistance due to alcohol consumption, that they will not be fined. That the appreciation for calling 911 and taking care of those kids is understandable and very, very necessary. It was good news this week to see that the governor passed, he had vetoed originally the Good Samaritan regarding drug abuse, and now he has passed that, so we're making great strides, and that's basically what this is to amend the original ordinance to include the Good Samaritan as well as the discretion of the judge regarding educational institutions.
Any comments or questions? Jeannie?
Yeah, did Judge Troxel have an opportunity to review this?
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yes.
He was
he's
the
in
first one
agreement?
that it went to,
Yes.
absolutely, yeah. The prosecutor looked at it also.
Anything else? Okay, this ordinance, or the amendment, and then ordinance is listed for introduction. It's ordinance 16. Green Avenue reconstruction update. Bob Vogel.
Good evening, everyone. The good news from the state is that we have a $230,000 grant on the Green Avenue project. That is a New Jersey Department of Transportation municipal aid allocation for 2013. It's the second time we've applied to the state for this money, and I guess the second time's a charm because they came through on that in the past week or so, as per the mayor's previous comments. Green Avenue reconstruction project has been the subject of years of public hearings and engineering analysis, and so the project is absolutely 100% ready to go out to bid. In the meantime, we have a reauthorization process that's necessary through DOT, which should take about a month to accomplish. Thereafter, we should be in a position to bid that project and move forward. Therefore, we have an appropriation recommendation on the table for you tonight. The scope of the Green Avenue project includes sidewalks, curbing, drainage improvements. Overall, it's a slight narrowing of the road for its entire length between Woodland and Shunpike Avenues. Our object on the design has been to kind of mirror what has been happening on the north side of Green Avenue, which is between Main Street and Woodland Road. Because that project overall, I think, provided some traffic calming benefits to it. Also, I think the additional curbing and drainage improvements will greatly extend the life of the pavement and prevent erosion, and probably ultimately provide a water quality benefit as well for runoff from Madison. So that's the quick summary. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions for Bob? So, thank you, and we're looking forward to Green Avenue getting underway. Okay, number 4, appropriate $42,000 from Capital Improvement Fund for a Civic Center parking lot. David? Nope, David, not okay.
Take it. We are advised by the director of the senior program that the lot, due to its deterioration, was a tripping hazard for the large number of seniors that are using the program. We are also, in terms of the Civic Center, there are multiple users at that facility, from residents and non-residents from the adult school, Playwrights Theater, Project Community Pride, together with the health department and those visiting the senior center itself. So in walking the site, we noticed that it appeared to be beyond its useful life. David Maines is away on a scheduled vacation this week, and so he is recommending, even though this was not on the list for the 2013 capital, to move it up in the slot. It was on his preliminary list, but in the scheme of the priorities that he was dealing with and a limited amount of money, the condition at the time it was removed from the list didn't warrant the investment given limited resources. It's now more of an emergent issue given that. The other part that we'd like to do as part of the repaving would be to address the striping and signage there, to give a priority to the seniors to have the closer spots, and also to increase the number of handicap parking spaces there. So the request is for $42,000 from the General Capital Improvement to introduce an appropriation ordinance for that effect, which would pay for the entire paving and also the striping and signage required to bring it into a safe condition for our seniors.
Okay, Jeannie?
Yeah, Ray, you mentioned that as part of this project, well, are we having additional spaces, handicap spaces, or just a matter of striping
It's
the
the striping.
current number?
We're not going to expand the size of the lot at this point. We are working on something, and the Board of Ed has been very cooperative, but that's not ready to move forward at this point. So it'll be the existing dimensions of the lot. It'll be restriped in a way to increase the number of handicap spaces allocated, but not the gross number of spots will not increase. Okay. And then we'll probably recommend striping a designated area for seniors only to be closer to the building, because what's happening is the non-resident users for the adult school take the closest spots and get there before the seniors, and the seniors have to walk from the farthest parts of the lot, and the lot being in poor condition, it's not a good condition.
Is it worthwhile to have the engineer take a look at, see if we can get more spaces out of there? As you know, there are never enough parking spaces in the lot when there are meetings or activities.
Well, we could look, I mean, normally we would say it's, compact spots, you could, by restriping and laying it out properly. Seniors tend to have a little harder time getting out of the vehicles and need a little skosh more space, and I'm in that category. But we will be hiring, as part of this approved, an actual firm to lay out the lot. We hired a company called Statewide previously who just did Sampson Avenue. They also laid out the community pool. When we did it, took our first cut, they ended up with an increased number of spots by the way they laid out the traffic flow. So we are going to take advantage of people who do this for a living to see if there are some improvements we can make to get more spaces. But the normal would be to shave the spaces down to smaller spots, and our seniors tend not to do well trying to get a larger car into a smaller spot and then get out of the car.
Yeah, I would not recommend that. I think the other thing to keep it, obviously provide the number of handicap spots that are necessary, but not more than it's necessary, because that'll eat away at the total count. But if we mark them for seniors only, and if we need to back it by ordinance so it's enforceable, so that we can reserve it, so we can have standard spots that are reserved for those in need. Other comments, questions? Okay, so this is Ordinance 17, 2013. That's listed for an introduction. And the next three are for our fire chief, which is Lou. Chief Lou, come on. After 30 years, he's a little slower coming up to the front of the room. So.
Nice.
What'd you say? Okay, three items that I have. The breathing air compressor. It's replacing one that we presently have that was installed in 1984. It's reached its end of life. We've rebuilt it twice already, and it's ready to go. So that's what we use to refill our air cylinders that we wear on our Scott packs. The other item on there is for a replacement upgrade of turnout gear, which has a 10-year life, and with an influx of new members, challenged with outfitting them and existing members. So 4 sets will help me to do that. And then the third one is for the radio consultant to try and find us a radio frequency in the same spectrum as everyone else around us, so that we can remain to have interoperability communication-wise, as our present radio communication frequency, along with the police departments, will be told or directed to turn off in 2022. So we're trying to get out in front ahead of the curve now while we can. If we can't find radio frequencies, it's a big expense for police and fire. We have to invest in new radios, everything from pagers to transmitters to receivers. So it's a big cost. So this is money well spent to try and accomplish getting new frequencies.
So, and the first two are budgeted in the capital, and the third one is out of the trust fund.
Out of the trust fund, yes.
Any questions for the chief? Any comments? Okay, these ordinances all listed for introduction tonight. Thank you very much, Chief.
All right, thank you.
And now we can move on to ordinances for hearings. And ask the clerk to read the statement.
Okay. The ordinance scheduled for hearing were introduced by title and passed on the first reading at a regular meeting of the council held on April 22nd, 2013, was posted and filed according to the law, and copies were made available to the general public requesting same.
Right, I asked clerk to read the ordinances for second hearing. Let me try that again. Call the ordinances for second reading and ask the clerk to read and said ordinance by title. Sometimes you can't do these things by memory.
Ordinance 13, 2013. Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $70,000 from the Water Capital Improvement Fund for the purchase of a utility truck and accessories.
I open the hearing. Anyone wishing to comment on ordinance 13, 2013, please step to the lectern. Seeing none, I close the hearing.
Mayor, I move ordinance 13-2013.
I'll second.
Council discussion. Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mrs. Tsukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes?
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
I hereby declare aforementioned adopted and finally passed, and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law. I now call up ordinance 14, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $50,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund for the purchase of a police department vehicle and accessories.
I open the hearing. Is there anyone in the public wishing to comment on ordinance 14, 2013? Seeing none, I close the hearing.
Mayor, I move ordinance 14-2013.
I second it.
Council discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes?
Mr. Catalinello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
I declare ordinance 14, 2013 adopted and finally passed, and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law. I call up ordinance 15, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison amending Chapter 25 of the Borough Code entitled Open Space, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Committee to specify reporting requirements to the governing body.
I open the hearing for ordinance 15, 2013. Anyone wishing to comment, please step the lectern. Keep your comments of 3 minutes or less.
Pat Road, 25 Pine Avenue, Madison, New Jersey. First, I want to congratulate or thank the council for putting this on the agenda. I think it's really good that we're getting to see going forward how the money is being spent. I had a couple questions and some comments. The first is maybe a request that we actually, for the first report, get an accounting of what's happened for the last 10 years or so of the money that has come in. The second comment is that a couple of these items look like they belong to the Open Space Committee because it is advisory and they are the ones considering it, but a couple of these items look like they belong more to the administration, including what is currently in the balance and also anything that's currently being expended, I guess including item A, which is the budget items. They typically do not control this money, is that correct?
That's correct. The intention was that they'll take the responsibility of making sure that they get the information. They'll make so it's a single spot for the report. They'll get it from the CFO, the administrator, and so on. It is the council that approves the spending.
Okay, because I mean, ultimately, you don't have to listen to their advice, nor you have to solicit their advice to spend the money. Is that correct?
That is correct. Though we're hoping that this will be a reminder to future councils that their communication process is better, so that we don't allocate funds without their knowledge.
So again, I'm not sure if you want to change it tonight because it would require you to issue a second hearing, but I would request that you, as you issue the first report, that you do it a full accounting going backwards. The last question is, do you recognize the money every quarter coming in from the taxes that goes into the open space? In other words, right now, do you have 2 quarters of the year's money's worth of the open space money in the fund?
So we recognize that. Okay.
You might want to note that in your report, that because people might think that you've already got $200,000 or so for this year. And then the last comment is just a comment in general. I think I've made this before. It would be really nice if you guys could publish some of this stuff in advance when you publish the agenda, especially stuff that's up for a second hearing. It's something that's already been agreed to. We can't always make it to all the meetings. Sometimes we'd like to comment by email, but reading the agenda item only it's difficult to ascertain what's going to be in the actual notice.
Yeah, and we are working on a little descriptor on some of the discussion items to help that out. Thank you.
But is there a particular reason why you can't include all the language that's in this particular resolution or this ordinance?
They are listed on the site because every ordinance has to be listed, so it should be.
Not the full text of the ordinance.
Okay. All right. So
I've never seen it. It's here outside, and if you steal one of the newspaper's copy, and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, they can request a copy of the ordinance full at any time.
So it can be requested, and we can look at as to whether we can.
At no charge.
Sorry?
So it can be provided by request, and we can look at the possibility of having them posted online. We'll look at that as we're moving forward to doing more and more online. And just as a follow-up for the look back, I don't think we need to change the ordinance. It was discussed in the discussion this 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, the importance of sharing a report on open space from day one, because it is a very good story and a story that should be told many times. So our liaison will take that back to the committee and we'll work on that. Anyone else wishing to comment on ordinance 15, 2013?
I move ordinance 15.
Well, I close the hearing, and
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Would you close it? I move ordinance 15-2013.
I second the motion.
Council discussion? Jeannie?
Yeah, I'm making the same comment that I'm making at the last council meeting. I believe it is very important for us to have the reporting at a quarterly basis. I totally also agree that this is important to improve transparency. However, I do believe that the responsibility of item A and item C listed in the ordinance, A is the status of ongoing projects, including time to completion and anticipated costs at completion versus budget. And C says current balance in the open space trust fund. I believe that the administration, along with the department heads and the CFO, should be held accountable for providing the data to the mayor, council, the committee, and also to the public, and not the other way around, for the committee to provide that back to the council and the mayor. If we're making a policy change that to have the committee be responsible for reporting, then we have to do it across the board for all the committees and not just single out the open space committee to do it only for this committee. So I'm saying that I agree that this is important from the transparency and for just the knowledge of having that data to make better decisions and recommendations, both for the mayor, council, and the committee. But I really believe that the responsible party to provide the report should be the administration along with department heads for the mayor and council and the committee, and not the other way around.
Just a quick comment, and then we'll go to, it's just a reminder, as we discussed 3 weeks ago and just mentioned to Pat Rowe, is the fact that, yes, they will be held responsible. What is the advantage of this is the fact that it's all in one spot. The format will be consistent because now it'll be one committee that will take this information and put it all there, and it will be done in a timely manner. And as I often remind people in the nonprofit world, when volunteers speak, paid staff should listen. So this is a good way to put the pressure on them.
That was one of the points I was going to make. The other one is that I agree with Councilwoman Tsukamoto. Indeed, all of the committees, or whatever we call them, that in any way impact the finances of the borough or are dependent on borough for financing should be held accountable. And in this case with the advisory committee, they, as we just learned, and for those of you who didn't know, they in fact just offer advice, right? So they don't have the ability to spend the money. They just come to us with their advice as to how they believe we should spend the money. But as you said, we need a central point, and it's at this point, many members of that committee are offering advice without having the ammunition they need to offer reasonable advice. They don't know how much money is involved. So this gives them the wherewithal to do it. We will have other organizations that operate within the purview of the government but are separate from it that indeed will have similar reporting requirements. The MAF was on the list as the next one, and we'll be discussing that in the next meeting. There'll be others after that.
Yep, and this is a dedicated fund, so this is different than some other committees
This
that
is
may
true.
not be looking over a dedicated fund. Any other comments? Rob?
To quote Mr. Luber from a few weeks ago, what happens if something goes wrong with the reporting? Who's liable?
It's on the borough, you know, it's.
So then if it's on the borough, why would we give responsibility for it to unelected officials or non-paid staff?
They are pulling, again, it's put in a single spot.
I mean, all they're doing is reporting the balance. They're gonna have to, that committee's gonna have to come to Robert Califoot or whoever and say, what is the current balance? Put together a report. All they're really doing is submitting a report that will include that information. The actual person who is responsible for maintaining the funds and the appropriate accounts, et cetera, would be Robert Califoot, your CFO. And so he will be the person that they will have to go to on a quarterly basis to find out what's in there, what's going on, et cetera. That never shifts away because he's the person who has the license. He's the individual who's being remunerated to make sure that things are done appropriately.
So, again, just to bring back my old engineering background, so why are we doing it? If Califit is the guy with all the knowledge and the license, why doesn't he just report it to us?
Because it again, as stated, puts it all in one location. And it has a committee, it enables the committee to be somewhat empowered by the fact that, as Ben pointed out, right now they are listening to needs for funding and not necessarily knowing what the amount is. Now they can, in a way, hold the CFO to task on a quarterly basis saying, please provide us, we need to prepare a report and we need to prepare for our next quarter worth of work.
And there's no increased liability in case of an error.
They have no liability.
Do we?
What's that?
Do we?
All they're doing is reporting. They're not the ones, the liability, ultimately, if there was an error in the funds, et cetera, the borough would have liability based on your professionals who oversee that. They don't have the access to the funds where they can write checks or do anything like that. All they can do is report as this committee to the governing body as to what things are. So that, you know, it's an advisory board. So they don't have liability where they'll be playing with the funds or have access to the funds. And they'll come before you, if you recall, a couple of meetings ago, if they want to expend funds out of that, they would give them a justification to come before you and say, there's $500,000, for example, in this fund. There's an acquisition that we want to do on, you know, Dotting Lane. We'd like to you guys look at that. So I think it'll help you guys with the dialogue, but they always have to come to you to get permission to expend any funds, to acquire any property, to make any improvements, et cetera. They can't do any of that without the governing body's consent by resolution.
And one of the key things in whether it's open space or any other ordinance is just an example. Take a look at Ordinance 13, 2013. Second whereas, which is whereas Chief Financial Officer has attested to the availability of funds in the Water Capital Improvement Fund in an amount not to exceed $70,000. So there is a process that has checks and balances, and no one is put in liability. Austria and then Ben.
Initially, when the Open Space Trust Fund started, the advisory committee, it was very straightforward because we were acquiring lands, and it was very easy to have accounting of the money. Then for a few years there, it got it became more difficult, and there was really no accounting to the council exactly where the funds were going, and some of the money was taken. You know, it came to the council like through a budget appropriation or something, but it just wasn't very clear. There wasn't a 10-year accounting background, as Mr. Rowe was asking for. So I think this is what this is trying to do, is to try to firm up that there's a committee that should be asking a question on behalf of the council, what an itemized account of what the money is being used for and how it's being used.
Ben?
Yes, I was going to also add that I believe it facilitates our work, because right now, if we wanted to get a handle on what's going on in terms of the allocation of monies from that fund, we would probably have to hear from our CFO, our engineer, possibly our head of Department of Public Works, and potentially other members of other employees and department heads. It becomes a completely ungainly process. Whereas in this case, the people who are asked to give advice don't have all the information they need to proffer good advice. This gives them the information they need, and they become a central point to brief us. So it seems to me it improves our efficiency and improves the transparency, and 10 years from now, there won't be another Pat Rowe Jr. getting up and asking the question, what did he do with the money over the last 10 years? Because people will know.
There's never
All right. I was just reaching.
Courtney won't be asking the question. Carmela and then Bob.
I think one of the most important things about this particular ordinance, you know, when push comes to shove, the onus is on this council. And at any given time, we could say to Robert Califoot, we want you to be at the next meeting giving us an accounting of the money. So that onus is always there and always has been there. If we haven't asked for it, then, then it becomes the council's responsibility. But I think that one of the most important things here is to find out actually what this committee is doing. What are the ongoing projects? Are there any that are going to be proposed or being considered? I think that those things are extremely important, and it makes this ordinance, very, very substantial. Like I said, we could always find out what that current balance is. And for those of us who've been around for a long time, we know what the Open Space Trust Fund has done in the past. But I'm looking forward to seeing what they have planned a long time before they come before the council and say, this is a project that we'd like to have done, and we need X amount of dollars from the fund. So I think it's good. Appreciate it.
Bob?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. In the past year or so, when I've done projects, I've worked with Ray, with Jim on different issues, and there are no surprises. You work together, you get it done. To say who has responsibility for this, who bears the onus of it, to me, if you work collaboratively, and let's say open space, yeah, they're an advisory committee, they're coming up with projects. But if you work collaboratively with the ultimate responsibility being on Robert Califoot, as the borough attorney said, there's no problem with the way this is written. They're advising on how they want to use the money. Their feet will be held to the fire, in terms of, okay, you propose this, you're going to see it through. You just don't throw out projects willy-nilly. This makes sense to me. There's no surprises, and people need to work together. Thank you.
Comments? Jane?
Yeah, just to add, in addition to the financial reporting, specifically to item A here, the committee does not have project oversight and budget management responsibilities. Again, this is something that I believe that the department heads should be responsible for and provide that data to the committee on a timely and scheduled basis.
I think that's what it means.
Yep. Yeah, it's certainly, I think it's been covered. And any other comments? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
No?
Mr. Catalanello?
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes?
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
I hereby declare ordinance 15, 2013 adopted and finally passed, and ask the clerk to publish notice thereof in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law. We are now on to invitation number 2 for discussion. This is when we have the broader guidelines. You can make comment on anything, but again, keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Step up to lectern, state your name, your address, and please write the same. And speak into the microphone.
Already signed in, so I won't again. I was hoping to get an update from the mayor regarding the helipad at the Jets facility. I had emailed you a couple times over the weekend, and you had said that you guys would be discussing something tonight.
And I will.
I'll discuss it. There's a legal document that controls this issue. Florham Park, Madison, and the developer entered into an agreement back, I guess it was 6 or 7 years ago, in order to acquire and do the land swap where we got the property, which now has the MAF site on it. There was a PUD, it was a planned unit development that laid out the entire footprint for the entire development. The number of residential units, commercial, Jets facility, etc. One of the agreements is that the town, Madison, cannot formally or informally challenge anything that's contained in that PUD, which contains the helipad. So we are precluded, as part of the agreement, from going and opposing anything before a planning board or zoning board in Florham Park in connection with the PUD development. So I've advised the governing body, this governing body, they're bound by this, they can't do that. If residents so desire to do that, they can. You should know that the county planning board has approved this, the FAA has approved this, and it's our understanding in speaking with the airport, the way it works is they have, they work through the control tower, and what they advise helicopters is they have to take off 800 feet vertically before they can move horizontally, and they're supposed to follow major roadways, such as Route 24.
Does that include landing as well?
I think they have to come over and then go straight down. They're not allowed to come buzzing in.
Okay. The agreement that you made with them, at the time, I don't think the jets were actually part of that planned development. I think that happened afterwards. That doesn't modify that in any way, shape, or form?
No, because what it says is the agreement talks about applications before planning boards, zoning boards. Actually, the agreement does speak to, the whole mixed use. Guess what it is? It's a mixed use facility. With the Jets complex, so there's commercial enterprises, residential enterprises, recreational enterprises, and it was decided with advice of the professionals who were guiding the governing body at the time on how to best situate the Borough of Madison to acquire this tract of land with that land swap. And the only way that could be done, because if what was my understanding looking back at it, if that wasn't done, there would have been a land swap, and Florham Park probably would have proceeded on its own.
So in essence, we kind of gave up some of our rights as a result.
Well, I think that there was a balancing, and I think what you have is a balancing of, based on the professionals and the planning board, et cetera, at that time, what made more sense for Madison as a whole. The issue, and it's my understanding that, various residents might, make an opposition to it, but this governing body, based on the agreement, my advice is they cannot make any type of opposition. They can't oppose it. They can't say anything negative about it as long as it complies with the PUD. And the PUD and the agreement speak to the fact that, there could be variance applications. What's interesting here is my understanding.
Well, I thank you for the update.
And one other thing I just want to let you know, there was an application down in Monmouth County with regard to a golf course called Sneck. I know about it because we actually were involved in the litigation. And ultimately went up to the appellate division, and they upheld Donald Trump's right to put in a helipad at his golf course, which is called, I don't know, I think it's due process. It was the former site that Robert Brennan owned, and then the guy from Arizona, Key purchased.
Farrellino and Gerhard purchased it.
Yeah, I had spoken to the person who's sort of heading up the fight against the Overlook Hospital helipad in Summit, and he told me that they've been winning so far, but the problem they're facing now is that this decision, actually, is Donald Trump was who made the application, failed at the local level, went to the state DOT, got approval, and so far he's been winning in court. That the
appellate division upheld it, and the case is over, because the DOT, the DOT
can't be appealed to the Supreme Court.
What's that? That you can, but it's very, very difficult.
Okay.
The only way you get to the Supreme Court is if there's one of the appellate judges dissents. If it's a 2-1 vote, it goes to the Supreme Court. If it's 3-0, it's only if the Supreme Court wants to take review of it.
And I also forwarded the mayor another link there. One of the other Johnson heirs has done something similar in Tewksbury on his farm, so he said it could be a big challenge. But so I understand the council can't take a position collectively. Are the individual members allowed to take positions
No,
as
they're
citizens?
not.
No, they're not.
They're not.
Okay, then anyone whose name is on my petition, I will strike your name off of it so you're in compliance with the law.
Right. Yeah, they cannot take a position.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see what we can do. I mean, I think our biggest concern, at least my biggest concern right now, is with the Super Bowl coming up. There could be a lot of activity in and out of that site, regardless of what Mr. Johnson promises in terms of the minimum number of landings. But and we do feel that the neighborhoods surrounding it will be impacted by the noise potentially. Right. And given that the airport's only 5 minutes away, it seems kind of ridiculous to have to add another heliport so close. But we appreciate your position. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard?
Frank Works, Mawanaga Way. I just wanted to thank the mayor and council for adding the amendment and supplementation of 16. I know that will go a long way to sort of keeping our youth in Madison safe. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Frank.
Anyone else wishing to be heard? Sam?
Sam Yellow Park Avenue, there's a few things I just want to suggest or recommend, and, you know, as the liaison of the people, I'm always around town, I see a lot of things. Maybe on a rainy day, the garbage cans in the center of town, they need a good power washing. So maybe, and also, maybe we ought to write a letter to the garbage man, tell the garbage guys when they do empty those baskets to put the thing back right, because they just throw them back and they're a little rough. We're paying them. But like I said, them cans are disgusting, and you're going to get a lot of bees. So maybe on a rainy day, the public works can cut them. And underneath it, each can is fastened to the sidewalk. They got to release the thing and power wash underneath that can, because like I said, they're disgusting. Especially now, summer's coming, you get a lot of bees and stuff. But after the garbage man pick it up, you should take a look on the bottom. There's about 2 inches of almost like magnets. So that's just a suggestion. Also, you know, New Jersey Transit is doing a nice job with the trellises and all that, and I've been watching them. In the meantime, Ray, do you know if they're going to power wash those trellises across from the bicycle shop, or they're going to leave the walls the way they are? Because they're leaving them the way they are. All right. Well, they need a good power wash and clean up a little bit, because
It does stand out now that you have the new...
I mean, the job they did is great. Also, the post office. You know, maybe we ought to send a letter to Ronnie again, tell him that they ought to do something with our Madison post office. The windows are actually disintegrating, and it needs a good paint job. It's disgusting in a town like Madison. Also, they talked about maybe getting rid of those newspaper things. Is that ever going to happen? We talked a year or so ago that the DDC or somebody was going to buy.
Well,
there's two there that's staying there, you know.
Well, you can't, by law, I mean, there's a First Amendment right.
No, I'm not saying...
But we had discussed providing a central location,
You have to
better...
provide a location for newspapers for distribution.
And the last thing I'd like to talk about is, you know, I've been talking to a lot of people, a lot of the old timers, is, you know, the farmers market's coming up. And do we have to have it in town and on Waverly? Why can't, and I talked to a lot of old timers, they'd rather have it at the high school or Rosedale so they could park. And not only that, I talked to Sergeant Creamer, and he said that he would love to get out of town. Because like I said, about a year ago, on a Thursday, around 5:30, the light at CJ's and Park Avenue, I caught the light 3 times because when they moved to Green Village Road, they cut off the right-hand turn. And it doesn't make sense to a lot of the old timers. They're not going to go buy two dozen tomatoes and the corn and walk around and go shopping. So they would like to go back to the old ways at the high school in Rosedale. That's what I get from all of them. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. And we'll pass that on back to the DDC as far as recommendation. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting and move on to introduction of ordinances and ask the clerk to read the statement.
Ordinances scheduled for the first reading have a hearing date set for May 29, 2013. All will be published in the Madison Eagle, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the public requesting copies.
Call up ordinances for first reading and ask the Borough Clerk to read said ordinances by title. Ordinance 16, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison amending and supplementing Chapter 233 of the Borough Code entitled Ordinance Prohibiting the Possession or Consumption of Alcoholic Beverages by Underage Persons on Private Property.
I'll move ordinance 16-2013.
Second that?
Any further discussion? Mr. Robb?
So I totally agree with the Good Samaritan clauses, without a doubt. Okay. My question is, the First Amendment allowed the judge to waive certain penalties if, in fact, the underage drinker was going to, I guess, a school, and the school is going to take some sort of disciplinary action. So what happens in the case, how is it different for, say, an underage drinker home from college who runs afoul of the law and he wouldn't be allowed to have the penalties waived because I seriously doubt, Villanova or Harvard or Princeton is going to put disciplinary action against someone who is, caught for underage drinking when they're home on break, as opposed to a student at one of the local universities in that case. And I'm not sure I agree with that, how that would work. And secondly, when we first, I missed the last meeting, I was traveling, but when we first brought this up, some of my concerns about the ordinance in general was, this whole idea of selective prosecution, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because I believe Judge Troxel got up and, said that you don't necessarily have to impose, we don't have to take a driver's license away. And, if we're going to make exceptions for students, why would you not make exceptions for everyone? It just seems like, remember how the draft got all messed up, where if you're going to college, you didn't have to go in the Army, but if you weren't, you had to? So how does this,
Yeah,
it doesn't seem fair.
I think
It doesn't seem like everyone gets equal protection under the law.
Yeah, I think the attorney can clarify that. For one, the statement is one way, the judge already has discretion to, based on what is presented in front of him, to make a decision as far as penalties. What was brought up as an example was not the fact that it's different than the draft that, keep going.
I'm just saying,
but I just want to bring the example of, as far as a penalty that for the non-student, yes, it's a 6-month suspension of license and the $250 fine, if I remember correctly. What was pointed out at the one meeting was what a potential student in Madison faces is expulsion from the school and a loss of a semester's worth of tuition. And in the grand scheme of things, that is a pretty serious penalty, and the judge could listen. And the judge could just listen to that. The judge could say, fine, it's too bad. He made a bad decision. $250, 6-month suspension on top of that. Lesson learned. The judge can still do that.
Yeah, I don't think this doesn't in any way take away the judge's authority. You hire the judge, and the judge has the right to consider, mitigating circumstances or aggravating factors. So just because you go to a school doesn't mean that the judge automatically has to waive that. It's just that he can consider it before the way the ordinance. And frankly, he probably can consider it regardless of whether you have that in the ordinance or not. Judges have great discretion in this report to look at the circumstances, et cetera. So I think that the one difference here is this says that if there has been a penal consequence imposed by an institution, whether it's FDU, Drew, high school, any type of educational institution imposes it, it's something for the judge to consider in rendering his decision as to whether or not to impose the fine, reduce the fine, impose the license suspension, etc. So I'm confident that this would withhold scrutiny of the judges, Mr. Prosecutor's confident, because it doesn't target one institution. It just gives the judge that much more discretion.
If we're going to do it, then you have to have the Good Samaritan clause. I'm not 100% sure this isn't a little overreaching, or that we're actually going to get equal protection for all.
This is one of those cases that, frankly, I think that what's behind this is to try to prevent kids from underage drinking. And as you've seen in Morris County, Bergen County, etc., there's a huge rash of drug addiction. I mean, it's a dangerous spiral. And so this is one of those ones where I tell people, you know what, let a judge tell us that we're wrong. At least we're trying to do something to save kids' lives. And frankly, a lot of kids, it's not them that get hurt in car accidents or when they're drunk driving. It's some innocent family.
I'm just concerned about equal protection under.
I think this gives.
It has nothing. It has nothing to do with concerns over, addiction or drunk driving or underage use of alcohol. It's all about equal protection. And I think that the way it's drafted is that it passes constitutional muster on its face, and really what you're talking about is an as applied. And so the judge, in implementing the ordinance,
is going to have to do it in a manner that passes constitutional scrutiny. I mean, if he favors one group, you use the example of people who are in the Army. If everyone who's in the Army gets it and every kid who goes to college doesn't.
I was saying that you, like,
that
some
would be
left
an
officer in college,
as applied.
you know, because if you're a 20-year-old kid and you don't go to college, you don't have that, the first exception doesn't apply to you.
Well,
But frankly, you know what, under this exception, let's say you go to, there's three, you said Princeton. Let's say something happens and Princeton says you were involved in that, we're revoking it. It doesn't limit it to an educational institution here. If you have a consequence for wherever you are, that person come forward and say, hey, Judge, this is what occurred to me as a result of this incident. So I think it passes scrutiny, and the judge will have to, you know, use his sound discretion to apply it in an even-handed fashion.
Okay.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
Okay, Ordinance 17, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $42,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund for reconstruction of Civic Center parking lot.
I move ordinance 17-2013.
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
Ordinance 18, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $630,000 from the capital fund balance for reconstruction of Green Avenue, Woodland to Shunpike.
So the general capital improvement fund. Okay, general capital improvement fund should be the, right, it's not fund balance, that is, yep.
Mayor, I proudly move ordinance 18-2013.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
Ordinance 19, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $40,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund for replacement of breathing and air compressor and cascade cylinders.
Mayor, I move ordinance 19-2013.
Second.
Further council discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
Ordinance 20, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $11,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund for purchase of 4 new sets of firefighter turnout gear.
Mayor, I move ordinance 20-2013.
Second the ordinance.
Further discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
Ordinance 21, 2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $8,000 from the Fire Trust Fund for a radio consultant.
Mayor, I move ordinance 21-2013.
Second.
Further discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
Ordinance 22-2013.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison replacing Ordinance 2-2009 pertaining to part-time, non-union salaries and offices.
I move ordinance 22-2013.
I second that.
Council discussion? Rob?
I am going to vote no to this, not because for no other reason other than I'm not sure that we should be proceeding with this until we have a contract for a large portion of our union workers. It's not that I love unions, don't get me wrong, but in this case, I feel that these guys have worked for 4 years without a contract. It deserves our attention, and in order to be fair to them, we need to handle that head on, and we should, we shouldn't be doing anything else until we focus all of our effort on that. So, just want to explain my vote.
Other comments? Jeannie?
Is this item in any way time sensitive? That we have to do this immediately?
I think it's related to just the fact that these are positions that have evolved since they were initially established, that the subcode officials were established with a salary range prior to shared services, and so what they provide has expanded substantially. And the recreation director, when we shifted to part-time, we did not envision the level of work that they put in. So that's it's just a recognition of that.
Right. What is the current maximum? I believe the ordinance that we're doing, presented this evening now, is we're changing the maximum, correct? Only?
Yes.
The
Only,
current
right?
part-time rec directors pay $20 an hour.
So the current maximum is 20?
Yes, and we're suggesting to increase the maximum to $26 an hour, but we would come back with a resolution
Of course.
with a salary recommendation that would be under that for your consideration.
And the maximum for the other two inspectors currently?
They're in the proposed ordinance. The recommendation will be significantly less. That department and those two individuals generated over $1 million in revenue.
No, I'm asking.
What the maximum
the
is.
maximum.
It's the old one's not listed, just we're checking it.
35,880.
So we change both of them? So we're changing the maximum from 35,000 to 41?
Right.
And there's no salary changes until there's a
Right,
recommendation that
understood.
comes back.
This is just
Yeah.
a range.
Yep. Other comments or discussion?
Mayor, it goes back to the question whether or not this is time sensitive. Now, is there any reason that we must do this today? I share the concern that Councilman Carolinello just pointed out. Is there any reason we must do this right now? So
I understand that. They didn't get a, yeah.
yeah.
It is not time sensitive, so it's a matter of whether the council feels that it's important to recognize these positions have changed. And we have a motion on the table right now, so.
Well, I'll just comment on. We're talking about recognizing people for doing additional work, and I understand that. You want to make their salary range commensurate with the work they're doing. I guess I'm having a hard time in my mind reconciling doing that to ongoing negotiations with the unions. I don't think that these individuals should be penalized or held, or should be penalized for negotiations which may not go the way we want, may not go the way the union wants. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, how many people does this really apply to?
3.
So you're talking about holding up salary range increases for, adjusting the salary ranges of 3 individuals for labor negotiations that have been going on for a long time? That just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I think each has to be judged on its own merit. And I would say that's the way we should proceed here.
Other comments? Carmella?
If I'm not mistaken, and I'll ask Ray and Jim this, but these people, these part-time non-union people also did not get an increase all through this whole process. So the increase was given to them of 2% when we finally settled with the Federation, right? And police and fire, right? And it was a decision of the council at that point to give all the non-union members.
Right.
But they hadn't had any raises either, right?
No,
Yeah.
but I mean, someone like our part-time rec director saved us probably $100,000 by consolidating positions. So when he gets a 2% raise, making $20 an hour, he gets a 40-cent raise an hour. I mean, this is a professional, an educator who's doing superior work here, who saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars in his career here, and we don't recognize superior effort when at the same time the people who aren't we haven't been able to negotiate contracts even though we've been bargaining in good faith and we're now in a state mediation and impasse process, they may not get across-the-board raises, they're getting standby pay, they're getting overtime, they're getting step increases. So if you look at the salary history for those individuals in that bargaining unit over the last 5 years, they've gone up probably 8 to 10% in terms of gross compensation. These individuals have gone backwards. So, yeah, to me, it is a question of timing and equity for these individuals. They haven't done anything wrong. They're superior achievers. They should be recognized. And we'll meet with the Teamsters tomorrow, but we're not going to give away the store just to get a contract. And that, unfortunately, was the pattern back in the 70s and the 80s when we did 20 years of 4% raises. We can't afford it. Our residents can't afford it, and we're not going to do it.
Okay, then we're shifting off into.
No one has asked to give 4% raises. We're just
so-
talking about signing a contract after 4 years, and
Right,
what's fair is fair.
Yep, so just as a reminder of the appropriateness of salary changes.
Because I wouldn't vote for a 4% increase.
Yeah. Two reasons you would normally do a salary range increase. One is that it hasn't kept up with the market world out there. Number two is the jobs have evolved over time, and 2008 predated the shared services and predated, that was exactly when this, the recreation part-time started. So that's what the decision process should be as you look at this ordinance. And
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I'm sensitive to Councilman Langen's comments about this. If I felt in any way that holding back on these three individuals would move us to a settlement with the union quicker and more equitably to everyone's opinion, then I would vote accordingly. But these are really totally unrelated. And there's an equity situation for the three people we're talking about. There's certainly an equity situation for the unions as well, but I don't see why we think that holding back on one will facilitate a solution on the other. There's no linkage in my mind.
Thank you. Jeannie? And then
Just,
Rob?
we obviously have more than 3 part-time employees, but these are the 3 that we want to propose a change? Is that why we only have 3 and not other positions, other part-time positions included in the ordinance as well?
And
We discussed this I think this is the 4th meeting in a row. I mean, this is not something coming out of left field. This has been discussed in executive session 3 meetings at least in a row. So I'm surprised that we're getting comments now when they weren't discussed previously. This is our recommendation. These are superior employees. They deserve the recognition and they deserve the pay and shouldn't be penalized by the actions of other parties.
And just to, these are 3 that are at the top of the range. There may be other employees that deserve increases, part-time employees, non-union, but they're within their range, and so it can be done without ordinance change. These are people at the top.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, because that makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
Okay. And I'm not suggesting that holding this up will facilitate anything. I'm just suggesting that we put all of our effort into resolving a 4-year contract negotiation. And, I mean,
sounds like a good plan.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, just the way I feel. And I missed the last executive session. I wasn't here. I would have brought it up. I was traveling, so I brought it up now.
Yep. No, I think that's certainly a message that nobody wants to have, whether it's Ford or Borough, Madison wants to have contract negotiations hanging out there. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Tsukamoto?
Yes?
Mr. Catalanello?
No.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Consent agenda resolutions. I ask the clerk to read the statement.
Consent agenda resolutions will be enacted with a single motion. Any resolution requiring expenditure is supported by a certification of availability of funds, Any resolution requiring discussion will be removed from the consent agenda. All resolutions will be reflected in full in the minutes.
Mayor, I move consent agenda resolution 158-2013 to resolution 161, 2013, and then resolution 163, 2013 to, let's see, so go, keep on going, yeah, to resolution 176-2013.
Any discussion?
Second that?
Second, thank you. Discussion?
I asked legal counsel on this, but I assume because of my membership in the Rotary Club of Madison, I need to abstain from 175.
In the what club?
Rotary Club of Madison.
Yeah, you should abstain.
Did you say we have to abstain?
Normally with the road, because we've,
I think the
in the
recommendation
past,
was
because
the
we said
opposite.
that no one was actually deriving a direct benefit from a Rotary event.
Oh, raffle license?
Yeah.
Then you don't derive a direct benefit. If you're more comfortable in abstaining, you can.
No.
If you're
I
not
just
deriving
wanted to
any
be sure
direct
it was-
benefit, yeah.
I just wanted to be sure it was
Right.
okay for me to vote.
And any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
Before we move on, just want to remind people, 162 will come back at the next meeting. The Madison Athletic Foundation's been working hard on their fundraiser this Saturday, so we have not been able to get together, so I encourage people to buy their tickets so they can support the event.
And
for
so we can
the,
get so they can get
tailgate.
an accurate count on the catering.
Yes.
Most important.
Yes. All right, and I've got my pages out of order. Approval of vouchers, I think, is where we are, and if I can find my page.
Unfinished business.
Old business? Unfinished business, there is none, except for I'm out of order. Moving on to approval of vouchers.
Okay, just read the amounts.
Yes.
Okay. Public safety, $33,000, $723.97. Health and public assistance, $2,934.55. Public works and engineering, $196,941.16. Community affairs, $1,676.66. Finance and Borough Clerk, $2,624,035.23. And utilities, $113,451.44. And a total of $2,972,763.01.
Mayor, I move approval of the vouchers.
Second that?
Discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Sukamoto?
Yes.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Walkowitz?
Yes.
And the only new business is to thank Patty for doing an excellent job up here. Thank you.
Have a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
So were any of the resolutions pulled from,
One is 62.
this is the one that was pulled?